So we've looked at the Weimar Constitution, and now we're going to have a look at some powerful and influential groups in society and ask why were they opposed to the Weimar Republic? Why were they against the Weimar Republic? So after the 1918 sort of semi-revolution, well, it was a semi-revolution for a number of reasons. First of all, significant and powerful groups in society were not removed. The senior generals in the army, the police and the judiciary, schools and universities remained in place, and most of these powerful figures in society were conservative. Many of them in fact hated democracy and looked back with affection on the strong Germany, the growing industrial power of Germany under the Kaiser. They now looked at this new situation which was full of uncertainty, and they blamed democracy for it. Even some politicians who took part in the democratic process were against democracy, even though they took part in elections. They actually despised the whole process of democracy. The person on the left there is Anton Drexler. Why are we talking about Anton Drexler? Well, in 1919, his German Workers' Party was joined by a certain Mr. Adolf Hitler, who renamed it when he took power. Took over. Didn't take power. He took power in this particular party. When it was overtaken by Adolf Hitler, he renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and referred to by their enemies as the Nazis, for short. So, a number of people, as we've seen, are against the government. But why do they hold that attitude? Why do they hold these anti-government beliefs? Well, they believe it's a lack of strong government. Remember, when we looked last lesson at proportional representation, it resulted in weak coalitions that very often broke up. So you have a number of parties. The Social Democrats, they represent, they sort of the Workers' Party, the Skilled Workers' Party. You've got a party for Catholics. You've got another party for sort of middle-class people, and very often you wouldn't get a coalition government until you had at least 3 or more parties, and these were very liable. These were quite likely to squabble, to argue and break up, needing a fresh round of elections. And some of the parties indeed were anti-Weimar, such as on the extreme left, the communists, and on the extreme right, the DNVP and the Nazis. Most Germans in the 1920s, however, did vote for parties that supported democracy. Right, I apologise for this rather alarmingly complex diagram of the main political parties from the extreme left through the middle to the extreme right. However, I do advise that you copy it down, and it's certainly in a basic form, so you get used to who these different parties are, because they do figure in understanding the breakup of democracy and the eventual rise to power of the Nazi Party. So on the extreme left, we've got the communists, supported by working class and unemployed, pretty much against the Republic. They want a Soviet Germany like Soviet Russia, but they will take part in elections to try and raise their profile. Ultimately, they hope to win elections and then destroy democracy. You've got then the socialists, the Social Democrat Party. They are left-wing, but just not as extreme left-wing as the communists. Tend to be industrial working class, some members of the middle class. They supported the Republic, supported some social reforms to help poor working people, essentially. Then you've got the DDP, the German Democratic Party. Mostly middle-class people, often it was also called the Professors' Party. They supported the Republic and individual freedoms. Now we've got the Catholic Centre Party. These actually had a mixture of kind of middle of the road and some left-wing and some right-wing, but the most important part of their identity was they were Catholics, and so they voted for the Catholic Party. They tended to support the Republic and the Catholic Church, obviously. Then you've got a conservative right-wing party. This is the party of a politician called Gustav Stresemann, who was a key figure, who we'll explore more later on, in the Weimar Republic. Tends to be sort of your wealthy middle class, your business owners, reluctantly supported the Republic. I mean, I guess they thought there's no alternative to democracy at the moment, although they were not more extreme in wanting the violent overthrow of the Republic. They kind of they liked the old days of the Kaiser, and it's all very much a rich business person's party. They're in favour of trade and industry. Now we're getting more extreme right-wing, the DNVP. For most of the 1920s, this was the biggest extreme right party. Again, middle and upper class, but much more conservative. Tended to be supported by government officials, soldiers, basically against the Republic, wanted a strong nationalist government, wanted to get rid of democracy essentially, and restore a strong Germany. Now, even more extreme than the extreme DNVP, the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, more commonly known as the Nazi Party. Ultra-nationalist, very conservative, ex-Freikorps members tended to support them, and members of the lower middle class, especially sort of small business owners, like shop owners and things like that. Completely against the Republic, wanted a strong nationalist government, wanted to essentially do away with democracy, blamed weak democracy for many of Germany's problems. So, understanding these views. So here's a Freikorps officer. That's not the actual guy, it's a picture of a Freikorps guy I grabbed off Google. It really turned our stomachs to see how quickly they got rid of the black, white and red flag of the old empire. Under this flag, thousands of soldiers lay buried in enemy territory. I don't hide the fact I'm a monarchist. When you've served your emperor for 30 years, you can't just say, I'm a republican. So you can see for many conservative people, this very large change, especially when the government's associated with the Treaty of Versailles and the defeat and so on. It's very hard. It's hard for many on the conservative right to stomach the changes. Let's have a look now at how the fact that you've got many influential right-wing members of German society, how that plays out. Well, let's have a look at judges. Well, most judges had not been removed, and judges are quite powerful figures in society. Let's compare how they treat left-wing and right-wing radicals. So this guy here insulted the Republic. He's a left-wing, probably a communist, calls it a robber's republic. Gets 4 weeks in prison, pretty stiff. This guy on the right, rather a non-flattering picture, calls it a Jews' republic. So this is more of your right-wing viewpoint, blaming communism and Jews for the defeat in World War I. Well, he gets a fine of 70 marks. So you can see much more lenient with the right-wing offender than the left-wing offender. Even more stark now, look at the number of murders. So these are murders by the extreme left, by the communists, and by the extreme right. Well, you can see the extreme right have committed how's that, like more than a massive struggling with maths, a lot more number, a much higher number murdered by the extreme right. It feels a bit odd saying the extreme right in a humorous voice, but you know what I mean. Even though many more murders are committed by the extreme right, you can see that the number of murders sentenced by the courts is actually greater for the left wing. Averages of 15 years in prison if you're extreme left, compared to 4 months in prison for murder on the extreme right and 10 on the extreme left executed. So you can see that the judiciary, the law courts are really rather biased towards the conservative right-wing views. In summary, I hope you can remember who opposed the Weimar Republic. Very much the traditional elements of German society that retain power, the army, the law courts, the judiciary, the police, university professors and so on. Explain why they had that attitude, hankering back to the old days of glory under the Kaiser, as well as the apparent weakness of Weimar democracy. The number of Weimar political parties, I hope you've got a bit of a grasp on those major parties there, and the judicial bias against the extreme left and leniency towards the extreme right.